Hello, good morning, and welcome to Doppler's Gear Garage. Hope you are doing extremely well wherever it is you are coming from in the world today. Hey, Chris, I thought you weren't necessarily going to make it today. Great to see you, my friend. So, one of my favorite things, of many favorite things, is some of my favorite people that I get a chance to hang out with on Saturday. And Chris, you're definitely at the very top of that list. So thanks again for everything. I've got this instrumental album that I'm working on and this vocal album that I'm working on. And as some of you know, and as I'll be talking about, Eric, good morning. Speaking of favorites, hello, my friend. But I decided to go back in and add 3 songs to the instrumental album and 3 songs to the vocal album to take them from EPs into LPs. And so this particular little groove that you're hearing there is kind of what I want to spend some time talking about today. Not so much just for talking about me, but kind of going, hey, this is what I think some of the good takeaways for some of y'all watching this might be. So in any case, Chris, awesome, great. Well, thanks again, my friend. First of all, next Saturday I will not be here because I'm going to be in Los Angeles at the guitar event of maybe a lifetime, the Crossroads. Besides G3 2024, let me rephrase, but of this year, so the Crossroads Guitar Festival, kind of every guitar player except for Steve Vai, Eric Johnson, of course, Joe Satriani. So for those of you who have not heard it, hey, Mike, what's going on, my man? Sunny Seattle, hello. We're in sunny San Francisco Bay Area. But G3 2024, basically the 20th anniversary has been announced, and gosh darn it, it's going to be great, so grab your seats. And again, next Saturday, I'm going to be checking out pretty much the most obscene collection of guitar players. If you're looking for not the refined collection of Joe Satriani, Steve Vai, and Eric Johnson, but to attempt to equal the guitar synergy there. Basically, the Eric Clapton's Crossroads Festival's got Eric, Joe Bonamassa, John Mayer, Marcus King, Ariel Posen, Sonny Landreth, the Brothers Landreth, ZZ Top. So all the guys that I'm really wanting to kind of go feed me with lots of great musical inspiration. And that's really kind of what the heart and soul of what I want to talk about today is. Because I'm fortunate enough to teach a lot of amazing people and guitar players, but one of the things that ultimately the biggest goal for me is to get people to be more creative. And it's a kind of a funny thing is the longer I play, the more creative I get. And, there's this kind of thought, what's going on, Stephen? Good morning. Great to see you. Thank you very much. Thank you. You have a groovy day yourself, my friend. The interesting thing about all of the creative process is that about a year and a half ago, I bought Goldie, which is sitting over there, kind of not getting as much airtime as she once did, but was, a pivotal part of my personal experience. And again, the goal is to kind of go, well, how can I help you in your creative journey, right? What can I do to kind of help you sail more ships off into the creative ocean? And so that particular guitar, I bought it, and within a day, I'd written like 10 or 12 little things, and I very clearly went, oh, I get what's happening. I'm writing an instrumental blues rock record, which was not at all the intention of what I had in mind with that guitar. And, originally I wanted to get kind of some sort of 59 Strat, and kind of go in a kind of just in that direction. That guitar just eluded me, and ultimately I was looking for what's called a Les Paul conversion, which is preferably some sort of gold top, but in the 50s, quite often in like 57, 58, and 59, they would just paint over a burst. So you could find one that actually underneath the gold paint was actually a burst, some of which actually have what they call a center seam, right? Where they've kind of matched the two, oops, hold on, there we go. They've matched the two sides of the top on the center there. They're kind of hard to find, but they're much less expensive than traditional bursts. That particular guitar originally came with P90s and still has its wraparound tailpiece, but those pickups have been changed out for PAFs. And so that guitar really kind of kick-started my creative process. It's an interesting thing as we kind of jet into this creative process. Nandini, good morning. I hope you're feeling well. You know, a new guitar allows you, if it's the right instrument, to kind of express. I'm going to make a strange analogy here, but a guitar is kind of like a bouquet of roses. In other words, it has a certain look, and let's be honest, the look of the instrument is inspirational. The way it looks when you kind of look at it in the stand, it evokes an emotion, and when you connect that emotion with your fingertips, there's an intent that comes out. But there's also a certain amount that the instrument itself, if you will, has its own kind of fragrance. And the thing about this guitar is it was kind of a, depending on who you're asking, was a happy accident in that, you know, I saw that this was going on sale. Initially, I'd heard that these were going to be limited edition with, you know, the kind of whatever they released initially. So this is the greenie reissue. It's kind of, if you will, the medium price point. And, you know, so initially it was like, oh, they're going to go on sale. They're going to sell out, and that's going to be it. And so I ran upstairs, said, Melissa, you know, what'll happen, you know, truth be told, like, hey, we'll get it, we'll play it, do a demo on it, do a video of it, and then I'll sell it, you know, and because, you know, we can't afford this guitar right now. And I got the guitar, but before I actually did, I called over to Gibson for some reason. Oh, right. I was an idiot. I just ordered kind of the standard shipping on it. And so I called over to Gibson, and I managed to get somebody on the phone, and they actually answered the phone there. And I got a really nice guy, and I said, hey, by the way, I'm a Gibson artist. I'm an endorser, but I bought this guitar. I didn't buy it through Artist Relations. And, you know, I want to change the shipping on this. And so he kind of arranged it so I could kind of get it here in like 2 days or something. Because for the extra money, it was nice to have the guitar here. And when the guitar arrived, I was like, oh, you know, the great thing about Goldie is a 54 Les Paul that, again, has been kind of retrofitted. So I kind of know a little bit about kind of 50s guitars. And this guitar, they really did such a great job of not only kind of doing you know, their replica of what Greenie was, but it looks, feels, and sounds like a 50s guitar versus just looks like a 50s guitar. I'm just like, I played this thing and I was just like, oh, not only is it a really great job at a take at that, it sounds like a 50s guitar, and not only that, it sounds like a great 50s guitar. Matt King, good morning. Your tracks, by the way, sounded great. I like the first one especially. Great job. So what ended up happening is that, you know, I'm working on this track here, and I'm going to go back and forth. The danger of my muting this thing and playing the track, which I'll do right now, is I forget to unmute it. Muting. So probably for the majority of today, I'm just going to kind of keep stuff unmuted so I don't have to keep going back and forth. But basically, what I wanted to walk through was kind of my take on the creative process and how I've learned to, one, accelerate that process. That was one of the things that I really loved about Matt. You sent those tracks through. I'm like, you know, they sound great. And it was very creative. And, you know, how do we take our love and our passion for the instrument and turn it into something that we can hit, you know, if you will, the space bar and... something happens that reflects kind of, you know, that initial intention. So, and I also wanted to unpack this process of this song because I'm so excited about this. So to wrap all the stuff that I've been yapping about all up with a bow, this is a song that was one of the original songs from the first batch of demos that were going to be in the vocal record. There's a song called Slave to the Grind, and it's Caleb Johnson, the vocalist that I'm working with, on the vocal album, who is my favorite vocalist in the world. And I, kind of were revisiting what 3 songs we would do. We're going to do a remake of Some Kind of Wonderful, which is going to be really cool. The interesting thing about the original is it has no guitar on it, which is fascinating. But it's right just in kind of our sweet spot of what we're doing. And then there is another song that's kind of a slower kind of stonesier thing, which I'm really excited about. And then in going to this one, the whole essence about what I wanted to do was be able to go back and revisit the project from the now having gone out and played all the instrumental songs, because the instrumental songs are almost like an instrumental incarnation of the vocal music. The songs collectively are really a body of work, so they have a very similar feel. So the experience I've had playing those songs out on the road has really informed me as the guitar player that I wanted to be. And the great thing about going through the recording process, even if you're like, wow, I just kind of feel like I'm hitting more brick walls than not, you just kind of start banging through the things that are in the way of where you want to get to on your creative journey. Creativity being the operative word, I'm going to start at the top of the track. So one of the things that I have gotten in the habit of doing that I want to encourage you to do is I will make little sketches of parts of the song. Oh wait. The original intro. Sorry, it's in drop D, and I haven't played this part because it got dropped. This was the old intro. Simple enough, but as I came back to the song, I was like, I want to do some different stuff. So I started with the intro. So here is just what I think should be just the raw intro guitar without the melody thing over the top. So if I were to just loop, let's see if I can get, so it's measure 3, and let's go to 7. I really, Caleb and I, the way we work is we get on the phone, I'll play something, on speakerphone for him, we'll go over some melody ideas, and I will create a melody guitar guide track. Hey, what's going on, Rez? Great to see you, my friend. And then he'll go off and record these incredible vocals on his iPhone, and I'll fly them into Pro Tools. Because I haven't asked him in advance if he minded if I was going to play anything, I'm not going to... It does look like Greenie. Thank you very much. Great sounding guitar. So we will take these parts, and then he'll come back with he'll send me 5 little voice memos, and I'll fly them into Pro Tools, and I'll just kind of layer them in the right spot in the track. So it's a process that we've kind of, if you will, in our internal scheme have perfected pretty well. So basically what I did was I put together these little vocal guide tracks for this little guy, and he went in and cut his vocals. I think I'm going to only share one of them simply because I don't think he would mind if I played the chorus here, and I really wanted to play the whole thing, but because it's not a done thing. that would be disrespectful to his input on this. But just this first little chorus here is just so stinking good, in my opinion. It just really gives you some insight into kind of how our little process goes here. So let me just make sure, first of all. There we go. All right, so here's the first chorus. I'm going to mute my mic here, and let's see if I can do this right. Hate the job, I hate the pay. Forgot to unmute my guide track. Where is my guide track? There it is. All right, let's try that muted. There we go. Here's Caleb. Let's do it from the pickup. Let's go back from here. And here we go. I hate the job, I hate the pay. Run myself a ragged till my dying day. What's the point in caring? What's the use in trying? Cause at the end of the day, I'm just a slave to the grind. Holy cow, can that guy sing? So that is Caleb singing into an iPhone. And we've perfected this little process. I then drop his track into the Pro Tools session, and I put a Fatso Senior compressor on there that I've got, quote-unquote, Caleb 1 preset just saved, and I just kind of fire that puppy up, and it's kind of that vibe is there pretty instantly. And so, you know, whether you're working with another musician remotely, which, you know, very clearly this has gotten to, for us, it's a very fast process. So the day before yesterday, no, excuse me, yes, the day before yesterday, I needed to get this song off to him because I had a bunch of things that I needed to do that day. So I came down that morning, got up early, and kind of pulled a bunch of different drum loops down from Easy Drummer / Superior Drummer, threw them down on the timeline, kind of just in a hodgepodge. So I had things to pick from as I got to in the section of the song. So instead of going back into Easy Drummer, or I should say Superior Drummer, same company, I just had them already out on the timeline so I could drag them from where I just kind of nested them one after the other into each appropriate section of the song. I'm working with a pair of amps behind me. I can't say what one of them is because it's a prototype, but the one that you can see on screen there is the California Tweed from Mesa Boogie. And then I've got this little box here that you're not going to be able to see, but this is the Eddie Boost drive, and this is from Messiah Guitars, and I'm just bringing the gain here, so it's just a little bit of hair on it. I'm a little out of tune. This guitar wanders a little bit in drop D, and I haven't played it for a couple of days because I've been doing some other stuff. In any case, the idea is that I was just working with the pairs of amps, which enables me to get just a little bit of stereo separation left and right. Now, why is that important? Because as you're creating a track, it's really easy to have stuff just kind of all start lining up in the center. And so all of a sudden, it's kind of like everybody driving, regardless of how fast they're driving in the fast lane of the freeway, it gets congested, right? So the ability to kind of get your rhythm guitars hard left and hard right. And then what I will do, depending on how I'm using that, is I'll actually record 2 sets of those guitars, and one of those 2 amps with this particular box sounds a little more fuzz boxy than the other. I'm going to gank this up a little bit. And that's essentially the A section of the verse there, which is this little bit of business right here. It's the drum fill. You. There we go. point being is that one of the things that Caleb said that was kind of the highest level compliment for me was that it was swampy, and that's really the thing that I'm going for. You know, one of the biggest influences of this past couple of months was going and seeing ZZ Top, and just watching the way the Reverend Billy F. kind of had slow. And just kind of the idea is that I don't have to be in a hurry to get wherever I want to get to. Really just kind of, allow me, if you will, kind of raise them up, ladies and gentlemen. Set the reset button and just kind of, it doesn't have to be fast. It doesn't have to be intense. In fact, slow is a different type of thing. So for any of you that battle with you like, well, it's got to be flashy or does it need to be flashy? No, actually, and the great thing is slow is its own version of flash. But in the creative process, also knowing that kind of the more colors that you got to paint with, ideally the broader the picture you can paint. You know, so as I kind of walk through this little arrangement here, and I'm just going to leave this thing unmuted, my mic here. I'm going to walk through it. I'm going to mute the vocal track. I'm going to unmute my melody track. I'm just going to play it from the top. I'm going to walk through here. Gosh darn it, that track is going to be an awful lot of fun. What's going on, Steve? Hello, 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 Philip. No, there's no royalties you have to pay for that. Glad we're aiding your garage sale. Let's hope you get some increased sales and buy some more guitars. In any case, this was a song that was it was actually the very first song to kind of get, there was a first producer, well, technically there was a second producer. I am the third producer on this vocal endeavor, and I'm the third and final producer. But there was a first one that ended up not being the producer, and then went up and worked with this other producer who ended up not being the right guy for the thing. But this was the one song that got tracked up there to kind of any sort of completion. And so kind of I've been able to kind of go back from time to time and listen to it. But one of the things that I wanted to be able to do was go back and, if we were going to, generally speaking, as we were adding songs to the vocal album, I didn't want to do anything old because I felt that being able to take, if you will, the pulse of where I was at musically and how I had grown over the process of playing the instrumental songs, which are so much like the vocal songs in genre and feel for me, I wanted to be able to take my reaction to everything that had happened, all those shows and folks like Chris who come out and supported. So, the funny thing is, Chris, I love you dearly, you know that. Oh, you're not going to be able to see it. Chris's comment here is maybe with an expanded edition with a demo track so you can see the progression from the demo to the final mix. So I've got to chat this over with Caleb. And I probably want to chat it over with Joe Satriani just because to get his feedback on, would he do that, and, is it a smart move? Is it something that, 10 years from now, I might kind of look back maybe at a different place in my career, if you will, which is a strange thing to say at my ripe young age, but kind of go, it seemed like a great idea for all the reasons it feels like a great idea. And then maybe kind of go, well, maybe I shouldn't have done that, But my inclination is I desperately want people to hear them. Because for me, they represent such an important part of the journey, and they actually allow you to kind of go, this is what these, and Caleb's voice, it's him singing into an iPhone. I mean, it's just, hang on, since I already played it once, I'm going to go back and hit that first chorus again. There's the first chorus. This is Caleb singing into a flipping iPhone. It's just wrong. In a very right way. I hate the job, I hate the pay. Hold on, I've still got my vocal guide. So again, I set up these melody guide tracks I'll set up the melody. Sorry, let me recap that very briefly. This happened very quickly. So about Zora, the drummer, who's on all of this stuff, initially the idea was I was going to add songs to the instrumental album. And Zora, the drummer, deserves credit where credit is due, said, if you got 2 days set up, the second of which was going to be for reamping guitars, and we're going to do drum tones and cut 3 tracks in the first day. It's like, that may be a little overly ambitious. You may find that spills over to the second day, and as I'm counting the dollars and cents of all of this, and looking at logic, I kind of went, he may be right. So I'm like, if I'm going to have him spill over into a second day, as well as Angeline, who will be playing bass, why don't I cut 3 songs for the vocal album? And off I went. And Melissa and I had a little conversation. She listened to my reasoning and was in agreement. While I can't speak to the specific, Rick, good morning to you, my friend. I've got a manager, an informal manager at this point that will be aiding in the shopping of this, but it's somebody that if I mentioned who they worked with, you would know them. And so I'm in a slightly more advantageous position than I was when last I started recording. So the reason of having 2 full albums to work with, it's a little bit better bargaining position for me to be in, going 2 full albums that I can retain ownership if we did a licensing deal. If a record company wants to just pick it up outright, which would be kind of an interesting endeavor, after all the time, energy, and money that's been spent, it would be kind of phenomenal. But that's a different decision. So the point being is the process of very efficiently, I tracked all my guitar parts and the things necessary for Caleb to sing this. I set up a vocal guide track. I sent him the lyrics. He felt he could do better than I did on my second verse, so he revised my second verse and hasn't sent it yet. But this is his just like first take on the chorus, just singing the living flippin' daylights out of this. It's unbelievable. I hate the job, I hate the pay. Run myself a rag until my dying day. What's just killing me. I just love this guy. In case any of you don't know, he won American Idol. I'm not necessarily, in all honesty, a super big fan of those kind of shows, but I have David Ritchie. Good morning, my man. Good to see you. Great to see you. Sorry, great to see you. But if it weren't for American Idol, I never would have found Caleb, most likely, or whatever. But the way that guy sings is just kind of out of this world. So, all that to say, I set up the vocal melody, sent him my rough lyrics. He sent that back literally, in a couple of hours. And then I dropped it into Pro Tools. I laid the bass. I'd made some small changes to the arrangement. And that whole thing with the, working in the creative space, which again, as you kind of work on this sort of stuff, even if you don't have a vocalist to work with, being able to go, okay, well, look, I don't have a vocalist, but I know what the vocal melody would be if I had somebody. So here's the vocal melody, right? I'm not going to mute it. Yeah, I am. So, as many of you heard me ramble on about this wonderful, amazing person that I'm working with named Lindy Day, that we're working on this lesson content, one of the things that we've looked at is whether we're going to hire some people off of Fiverr. So there are a bunch of great vocalists on Fiverr. So if you don't have the ability to sing, but can craft your vocal melodies, well, guess what? Fiverr. So, again, what I did was I laid out the essential sections that I needed Caleb to sing on. I dropped in a vocal melody. I sent him a track with the vocal melody, and I sent him a track without the vocal melody. So if he wanted the vocal melodies, he was cutting it, he had it. If he wanted a version, so he had it as he was learning it. But when he went to then sing along with it and didn't want the guide track there, he had the option of the two. So working with somebody on Fiverr like that is a great option. So you can bring somebody who can sing great. Doesn't have to be in your neighborhood, but you can actually bring that sort of experience to your music. And the great thing about it is that I kind of went from being somebody that has never been much of a lyricist to kind of one day, as we got ready to start doing this project, I was like, I want to start writing lyrics. And so I started writing flipping lyrics, and I started to find that the more I started to write lyrics, the better I got. So here is my advice to you when it comes to lyrics. If it's the obvious lyric, keep banging away and work on it until it's not the obvious rhyme scheme. Nobody wants the obvious boring. So the lyrics, as they start here, it's kind of a traditional blues sort of a thing. When I was just a boy, my mama said, son, there's more to life than just girls and fun. Got to pay your dues like your daddy did, put him in the grave. But that's the way it is. So the idea is that, all right, we've heard the when I was just a boy, my mama said. So you got a half a second to either kind of pull people into the story and go like, have I heard this one before? Because if they're taking me down that old beaten path that's been beaten down, versus like give me a different take on it that is familiar but yet not grossly repetitive, then we're using this jump off point to tell the story of the song. And, so really kind of the song is about kind of, I've worked a couple of dead-end jobs in my life, and that feeling that you're just kind of going through life like a zombie from day to day, job to job, check to check, is a feeling I think most of us have known. So it's again, the idea that that human experience allows us to tap into something. And, ideally, the lyric content and the melody content and the chord content should work together. So, again, the neat thing is, even as an instrumental, because one of the things that happened at this last show, the day before the baked potato show, I'm messaging the venue and like, hey, what time is sound check? Blah blah blah, and the venue owner is like, hey, by the way, we want you to do 90 minutes, and I was like, we don't have 90 minutes of material, so. Frantically, I added one of the songs that has kind of been in process. It's going to be one of the 3 new instrumental ones. And we also ended up doing a version of Little Wing, which actually is now going to be kind of one of our regular things because I was really, really loved playing it. I've never really done it before, simply because it's one of those songs that's been done so many times. But Aaron Fife, what's going on? Great to see you, my man. Good morning. Good morning. Thanks for that text. I got through that. I did not have a chance to reply, but right to the heart there, my man. Great to see you. Hello. And Lisa Halbert, I think that's Jim Greeny is back. Thank you so much. God bless, man. So this song, one of the things that Melissa said, well, can't you take one of the instrumental songs or one of the vocal songs and turn it into an instrumental? And there is a song called, oh, no, I'm in drop D, my bad. I'm going to leave it there for right now. In any case, that we did do that with. It's actually going to be on both recordings, both albums. But I didn't feel any of the other songs from the vocal thing would lend themselves well to being instrumental. This one will. So if you're kind of like in a place where you're like, hey, I want to go out and play my songs, but I don't have a vocalist, well, some of those songs may actually make the transition to being able to do something that you can play as an instrumental, so you can go out and play them. But the point being is I want to encourage each of you to just kind of get into your writing groove. Now, as it relates to this little breakdown section, which is probably my favorite section. No, that's the reintro. There it is. This is what I'm looking for. No. It's this. Get the point. But I really wanted to do something in revisiting the song, and this is one of the strongest things that most of us never get a chance to do. And again, I have to credit Caleb. Caleb was the guy who said to me, first of all, we had this conversation that some of you may have heard me refer to before, sitting in a Guitar Center parking lot, and Caleb, hey, what's going on, man? What's happening, my man? ZZ Topish, I'll receive that graciously and thankfully. Thanks, Aaron. Sonia, what's going on? Hello. Great to see you. I hope you are having a great weekend as well. In fact, you should recognize that cabinet, which I still haven't stuck a speaker in, but great to see you. So, in kind of getting a chance to go back and having had the perspective of going out and playing a bunch of songs was really normally the last thing you do, unless you're kind of working up your material to go into the studio, quote unquote, is you kind of get, I don't know, halfway through making a record, get all your basics done, and then go out like, let's go out and play some live shows. But really what happened was Caleb had this conversation with me where he was saying, look, this vocal thing is like, quite honestly, Caleb has is managed by Doc McGee, West Coast. Shane, what's going on, my man? Great to see you. Hello, hello, hello. He's got a serious career, and so getting Caleb out on stage is not an inexpensive endeavor. And so it was like, there's going to be a point where you may find yourself in kind of an in-between land where, you can't necessarily afford to bring me out and you're wanting to do stuff. You need to figure out how you're going to manage that. And so the instrumental album, he basically said, you need to have your own thing. And that's kind of when I went, literally that day is like, okay, I'm doing an instrumental album as well. Which at that point, it's like, well, wait a second. You're doing a vocal album and you can't necessarily always afford to bring the vocalist out. So you're going to do an instrumental album as well, too. It's like, normally that's the recipe for insanity, which for most people is probably true. But for me, it was a solution to be able to kind of figure out how I was going to go from a guy that was very much living in the background and not as an artist to kind of turn the corner to kind of like, hey, I'm going to put the artist hat back on and I don't know, let's see what happens. And so it gave me two different vehicles. And ironically, the instrumental vehicle was something that I was able to kind of turn the lights on and immediately go out and start playing shows, and people were actually interested in going, which is kind of awesome. And because there's a certain moment you kind of go, oh, I'm going to put this together, and I don't know, maybe people aren't going to like it. I don't care who you are. I don't care what you're doing. There is a moment you kind of go, well, I love this, but that doesn't mean the rest of the world's going to as well. But I remember saying to John Cunaberti, as we were recording the first batch of songs, that I needed time to kind of grow into this. And he was kind of like, well, you're ready, and the great thing about having seasoned professionals around you is they will see things in you, good, bad, or in between, that you don't always see in yourself. But the other thing is sometimes they see the potential, but sometimes you see that potential hasn't yet been realized. And so going out and playing these songs enabled me to kind of go, I basically, going with that first set of instrumental shows, I did rough demos using the Eddie Boost Drive, which I won't bother pulling into frame here. Oh, yeah, I will. This is a custom color they did for me. There we go, the Eddie Boost Drive. Love this pedal. And the Mesa Boogie Mark 525, using that kind of on the clean channel to get a middle third channel. Very important sound, kind of that not all the way kind of over the top distorted sounds. More of, if you will, the Jeff Beck channel, if I were to be brutally honest. And the point being is that then kind of going, okay, now going back and listening to those songs, having kind of demoed the album after having done demos to record the album, really allowed me to go, okay, this is what I want to do. And in turn, that informed me what I wanted to do with the vocal album. But in turn, having the ability to go back and then go, we're going to add vocal songs to this. Like, I had a very clear idea of what I wanted to do. And initially, I didn't want to do any of the old material, but as Caleb and I were talking, we talked about this song. And I was like, you know what? This one I could do, because there's things that I wouldn't want to do in it. So this little section. So one of my biggest complaints about Instagram, and this is going to be a micro rant. That's totally Stevie Ray. But one of my biggest kind of micro rants is just like, man, it's just like people are chasing Stevie's ghost instead of looking to find their own thing. And I'm just like, it's funny. I think there's tremendous value in people being able to go out and see tribute bands. I think there's tremendous value in falling in love and chasing Stevie's vibe. There it is. That totally is a little Stevie moment. But as opposed to jumping all the way in and kind of going, I'm so immersed in Stevie that I'm not necessarily going to find myself. That's kind of where my thought is kind of like, man, with all that energy spent, imagine if you spent all that energy just kind of drilling down and kind of going, here's my sound. And I don't live in other people's minds, but I kind of watch some very amazingly talented players kind of going, man, if they put that energy in developing their sound with that level of gift, I'm just like, dang, because, and I don't care who you are. I've heard Joe talk about it, where the level of players these days is like, it's ridiculous. I teach these two 12-year-old kids. One of whom, he actually, he did his version of the Nuno solos. Like, it's up there on YouTube. It's just like, it's just crazy. And the other one, like, when I met him at the Petrucci camp, I was like, all right, why don't you go up and down the neck, calling out the note names for the different keys while playing. It's like B, C sharp, D sharp, E, F sharp, and they're both 12. And I'm like, how does that actually happen? And, the deal is they're growing up being inspired by players like Pliny, who are the generation that grew up being inspired by the Steve Vais and the Joe Satrianis and the John Petrucci's. It's scary, the level of talent, gifting, and hard work that has gone into this. But we are, it's an interesting thing, as I've been thinking about, gosh, am I actually going to say this? Let's see if I can say this without, well, actually, I've got this broken string on this guitar. No, I'm not going to grab it. So, the interesting thing is that, no, I'm not going to say that. I'm going to save that for once. But, the idea is like, well, how do we go from where we are now? Take a look at that which has been done before and go, well, that's great. But what's now? And that's one of the reasons I really am excited about going to see the Crossroads Festival. Is as somebody that wants to be inspired, who wants to inspire other players, arguably, one of my favorite things is not just teaching, but helping other guitar players kind of evoke and emote whatever it is that's inside them, so it can better come out. That's like, it's one of the most rewarding things, because if you go and do a show, it's a great experience. I love that. I love that experience, but kind of ends the moment that you put your amp on standby and the set's done. The moment's over, right? But when you pour something into somebody's life and you give them the ability to kind of go create, that's a different thing. And that's what's fun. So the idea is like, well, yes, I'm going to Crossroads because I'm going to mine every guitar player that crosses that stage. I'm going to both days. I want to figure out what, the slide players are doing, that I want to figure out how I can bring some of that into my vocabulary, rather than kind of doing the Derek Trucks thing, which again, just like, it's so imitated and it's so great, but like, I wished I heard, 50% of the people that are just kind of imitating his thing go, well, now I'm going to take that and I'm going to riff on that. Because that, when I was coming up in the 70s and 80s, that was kind of what bands did. Is like, they kind of went, okay, they're doing that over there. Let me go take a little bit of that, but I'm going to go do that over here. And I wish I heard more of that. Aaron, if I pull this in, it'll be like 1-point font. I'm going to read this. So, I've been in the wings for every stage of your career. And Doug, where you have excelled where others have not is your escalating ability to transmit what you're feeling, and you feel great. Others not so much. Aaron, you're a gem and a joy. This is an interesting thing, and kind of the evoking of emotion is a really important thing. What's going on? How you doing? Love all that. I've had an interesting, range of good and dumb luck simultaneously. I put out my first album, and grunge hit, and it was pretty much over. I put out new instrumental, and then kind of the new metal thing ended. I was like, well, okay, and so the neat thing is I had a bunch of time in between these things, instead of kind of being out there kind of puttering around trying to, sell my discs and my wares, to find some other things, but also respond to music as it's grown. And I have to say, there's probably never been as great a time for the guitar as there is right now. I first of all, what's going on, Satch? Oh, there we go. I saw Philippe say it's a great player, and also Guthrie Gov, and I work in a theater, 1,000 seats. Yes. So first of all, Philippe is somebody that I saw at the Dallas International Guitar Festival. Saw him also at the Vive. Actually, the OC Vibe. I saw this on my desk the other day. So it was my buddy Bruce and Tom's guitar festival / guitar show that they do in Anaheim. It was the first year. And what a great player. Just, and so, the great thing is that there are so many on fire players. It's a great time for slide, and it's a great time for guitar. I really, I have to say, probably, as much as John Mayer deserves a lot of credit, I would have to say, kind of with the current state of, if you will, kind of blues rock guitar, Joe Bonamassa is probably the guy that if there was any hat tipping to be done, he's done so much to kind of put blues rock back in the forefront. And I don't know if necessarily everybody would necessarily agree, but for me, first of all, he's a great player, great songwriter. If you haven't heard his song Black Roses off of his most recent album, it's just a great track. And his band is ridiculous. It doesn't suck to have Josh Smith on second guitar. But, he's a guy that has fine-tuned pretty much every element of the music business into a machine. Getting back to you and the creativity. This little part here, right, and there's a Black Country Community album in the works, and Joe sounds great on that. This little part, started off with it. This little kind of swampy thing that'll be a little bit louder in the final mix, but there it is. Something like that. But Larry knows. Oh, there it is. And I may add wah-wah to that, but I wanted to do something as like, I've never done that before. And to the best of my knowledge, I've never heard, let's see, can I solo them? Yeah, I can. Let's see. They may not be perfect because it's a demo, but who cares? And I was just like, you know what? I want to live in the swampy thing. That. And it was one of the things that I really, what's going on, Katie? How you doing? So I really wanted to get the swampy thing, and it's still not quite as murky as it's going to be, but I really, I had to put this together really quickly, which for me is I'm a bit of a lingerer. And by the way, if you wanted a piece of advice, there's a certain amount of and hang on, let me hit the pause button. First of all, there's a question here. Fats, oh, okay, hold on. So what I'm playing through at the moment, let me turn this off. This is a pair of amps, and let me turn off all the good stuff, because I'm always happy to answer tone questions. So yeah. All right, you go bye-bye. I don't need you. Here we go. All right. Oh, my word. Windows, nothing more than Windows. There we go. All right. So this right here, first of all, it's just a sound. Let's see, here's one amp, and they're not going to sound great on their own, which is a... Actually, that's... let me rephrase. I'm going to mute this in a second. They actually are going to sound, in my opinion, great on their own, but for not the obvious reason. Now, what's wrong? What's standby? One sec. That would be yes, I was on standby. Hold on, let me turn that in. There we go. That's the one amp. Here's the other amp. All right, now I'm going to mute my vocal mic. That delay, by the way, is the Cooper Time Cube, and it's one of my favorite sounds ever. All right, so now I'm going to add the Eddie Boost Drive. Flippin' A. So it's kind of like, if you will, if you combine kind of my favorite elements of Jeff Beck and Jimmy Page and Joe Satriani and Billy Gibbons, it's kind of like all that stuff kind of all thrown together. The part of the secret is, and by the way, for those of you that, I had kind of a groovy week. I did this interview with Justin Crew, Kirk Hammett's guitar tech, and a couple of people independently showed up and said, hey, by the way, do you know it got picked up by Yahoo and it got picked up by Guitar World? And so, in any case, this interview's now got 16 or 17,000 views on it, which is really exciting for me. But one of the things that Justin talks about is the Metallica sound is almost always 2 amps together. It's like, note to self. And so I can't talk about what one of these amps is because it's a prototype on loan from the manufacturer. But the pairing of amps and getting back to the creative process, and I apologize, I'm a little meandery. I guess I'm always a little meandery, but oh well. The creative process is something that if you can kind of tap into it, it's not something that overnight you wake up and you're like, I'm creative today. I think we're born creative, but the thing is learning how to bring out that creative range of emotions on the instrument and kind of make that happen. It's a process of learning to engage that process. One of the things I encourage you to do that for me was transformative was if I heard the Muse knocking in the middle of the night, I was obedient. I would get up and I'd go write the songs, and those are my best songs. They just kind of come from above, for me at least, and I'm just kind of like, wow, and just like, and I learned to not use my iPhone to capture them. I learned to basically immediately go and put them straight into Pro Tools, such that I started the session at what was potentially the keeper tempo, so I knew what the initial vibe was, even if I changed the tempo. This particular song, I slowed it down. I felt, and going back and listening, it was just a little too caffeinated, and I wanted to have a little bit. And the funny thing about that sound to me, it's like frogs croaking, right? So the idea of kind of going, okay, there's probably certain times of the day that you're most creative. Be mindful of that. There are also things that happen when you're in the creative zone that you also want to be mindful in terms of process. I probably should have started with this at the very beginning. My apologies. So that is to say, these little... Sorry, just getting that loop there. Not very well, but the point being is it's got this crazy... And so I had the little kind of that's this guy. Going, I was like, you know what? I want to put another guitar on that. I was like, ooh, because you would never expect to hear Stevie Ray and Mr. Swamp Dude hanging out. And there I blatantly was like, we're totally going off to Stevieville. But the neat thing is instead of living in Stevieville, we just kind of rode our horse into town for a minute and went like, let's tip the hat. Now we're moving back on. But the neat thing is it allows you to bring that in without, I think there's a certain amount where people fixate on spending too much time hanging out in the town of their influences versus kind of going, how do I find my own sound and own place to live? So I want to encourage you to kind of figure out how to kind of find that balance, whatever works for you. And if you just want to hang out in Influenceville, no shame in that. But but I want to encourage you to kind of go, well, what's your voice on the instrument? How can you go about finding that? And I think if we spend too much time hanging out in somebody else's town, we start not having a chance to decorate our own village. All right. So the thing about parts like that is that there were a couple of things in this song and the other song that we're working on where I'll just go through and I'll lay down a bunch of different sections, and quite often I'll find that the first idea that I threw down, it didn't work. And the second idea didn't work, and the third idea, and it didn't work, and the fourth idea, and it didn't work. But it's the fourth idea that allowed me to play the fifth idea that was the idea that worked. And I'm like, I'm happy to take that journey and spend the 45 minutes playing and kind of coming up, because most of the time the part is a reaction emotionally what I'm hearing musically. Kind of to Aaron's point, is it is an emotional thing. It's a feeling that you translate into music. And then once that happens, once I find the part, I document it. And the great thing about this first little part here at the top of this thing, this little guy. And this, by the way, again, generally speaking, I will double guitar. So this is both the same 2 amps. This is just one pass. Here's another pass. And here they are with the vocal mic muted, both of them together. And it just fills the stereo spectrum a little bit better. Now here's this thing about buying more guitars. The telly is there. So one of the things that I did specifically for this song, which is kind of one of the ironies when it got shelved, it's a Telecaster Player Plus, which is a great guitar, $1,000 give or take. It's got noiseless Telecaster pickups that the Telecaster, I'm just going to say the Telecaster snobs turn their nose up. They're flipping great pickups. Great pickups. Obscenely great pickups. I'm just like, wow. But the telly snobs, and it's just like, holy cow, just get off your mountain and stop whining. If there's one thing that drives me nuts, it's whining. It's just like, it's supposed to like, hey, you know what, that wasn't for me, blah, 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 as I whine about chasing the Stevie Ray ghost. But the point being is I do that because I want to see people find their own sound. That's so important because it's a life's journey wasted. And I'm not saying that of people who play in tribute bands. It's not what I'm saying. It's like, that allows you to get your yarns out. That's fine. But if you've got a voice that you're wanting to bring out, bring it out. So that Player Plus Telly, we had an Evertune bridge put on it and set up for drop D. So I went over to Gary Brower's the other day because I finally just went, well, fine, I guess I'm not going to have it at drop D. I had him set it up to E. And I was like, back to Gary's I go, and had him set it up for drop D again. And that's that Player Plus Telly. Because unlike this guitar, that when you bring it to drop D, the pitch wanders. I should say the strings just don't sit in the nut in the same way. This guitar was not meant to be played at drop D. It's really meant to have the low E at E, not at D, and it just kind of, last week I was talking about the fact, this guitar does not yet have locking tuners, which I probably will undoubtedly put on here. What I like to do is on the bass side of this ring that we got in frame, as I like to wind with a locking tuner more string around the bass strings because it increases the tension on the bass strings so they don't go sharp as easily if you hit them hard with the right hand. The thing about the Evertune is you can hit it as hard as you want, and the thing about if I hit soft and I hit hard, the difference between how much gain you're getting out of your circuit. And so, for me, I'm very conscious of how hard I hit, where I hit, and all of that stuff. The other thing that I've been spending just a huge amount of time with is just kind of messing with, this is kind of, and this is one of the things that I'm always, one of the reasons I want to go to this Crossroads thing is I'm always trying to learn. So one of the things that Gary Brower mentioned about this guitar, this is the Greenie reissue, as I said before. In the middle position with both controls, all the way up, volume controls. You can kind of hear that. Not my favorite sound. But if you back off one of the volume controls just a little bit. Back up. Backing off a little bit more of the neck. So the point being is messing with those controls all the way up in the neck. Like more than just a little bit of Jimmy Page there. So this, it's an interesting thing. Is like it does the Jimmy Page Les Paul in the neck position there. You know. I'm not going to mess with the tuning. In any case, I want to encourage you to spend some time messing with the tone controls. I've really found that the majority of the years that I played guitar, I had a tendency to just kind of leave everything all the way up. Generally speaking, I find that Les Pauls, I live with a tone control somewhere between 7 and 5, depending on the guitar, and depending on what I'm going for. But in this particular instance, we're right about 6 right here. Muting the mic. And really messing with, kind of how hard you're hitting the front end of your amp. And the end result is you end up with all these different flavors that, depending on the section of the song as you're working in the arrangement, how you hit the strings, which guitar you pick, how you're using your instruments, enables you to have more colors in, if you will, the palette that you're painting with. And I think it's one of the things that a lot of guitar players miss. So as I'm kind of working on, again, a section like this little bit of craziness. And then what else we got? We got some other going intro. What are you? Are you another one? I think one of the mistakes that I've made certainly over the years is that, if I'm playing with a distorted tone, it's got to be the biggest, most distorted tone all the time. And as an end result, I missed a bunch of flavors in between. And the idea is it doesn't always have to be the gain all the way up. And generally speaking, I'm finding these days, especially, I'm living in a place where I'm kind of living more and more on kind of what would traditionally be a middle channel. Not always, but there are times there. In any case, we went down the tone rabbit trail, but that's a rabbit trail I love to go down. All right. So hey, okay, there we go, there we go, there we go. Chris Alexander, will the solo Dallas pedal be on any of my new songs? This is a great question. So this next week, I'm kind of starting to assemble. Ideally, this past. Sorry, I saw this. I had to jump down with this. So it's an interesting thing you mentioned. It's going to be like 4 points legible to some. Rick's comment. Here's a thought: a little Stevie mixed with some Swamp mixed with Metallica. I gotta jump back up. What's going on, Pharrell? Great to see you, my man. And Katie, hello. I'm going backwards in the chat, which is never a smart idea. One of the things that I've really kind of been trying to think about, and I kind of started to talk about it in Guitarville, but I decided not to. I'll hint at it. I'll do that. You know, it's an interesting thing. If you look at guitars, a lot of the energy seems to be looking at older instruments versus like, hey, kind of, you know, there are a bunch of things that have happened that are, you know, kind of more on the modern end of things. And that's, I'm just going to spell the mean. So kind of as I looked at the Flying V, kind of thought, all right, there's a bunch of stuff that is vintage about, you know, kind of this Flying V that Gary Brower and I cooked up together. But at the same time, we kind of went, what can we do with all the most modern, you know, stuff? Sustainiac, Floyd Rose, such that if you dare endeavor to whammy, you're going to whammy mostly in tune. You know, a 5-way switch. Like, what are all the things that are available? The other thing that Gary and I talked about that will be going into one of the other versions of the Vs, we're creating a new V right now that's going to more or less be 2 single coil, well, actually say 2 narrow aperture humbucking pickups. So they're going to look like Strat pickups and then a humbucker in the bridge, or a traditional humbucker in the bridge. And then the 4 knobs and a 5-way switch. But what we're going to do is one of the tone knobs, there is the ability, since I'm kind of messing with different gradations of tone control, there's a tone knob that has, I think Gary said it has 6 different positions in it, where literally you're kind of dialing, they're preset, but you're dialing 6 variations of how far the tone control is up or backed off. And these are modern things that I'm excited about kind of going, well, look, what are all the toys that we've got to work with now that we could start building into these guitars that are kind of, if you were built on, you know, more traditional platforms, you know, because, you know, the unfortunate thing is that, in my opinion, which I guess I'm sharing more of than usual, I think, you know, I love the vintage looking designs. And for the most part, with the exception of Ibanez, which still has, you know, if you look at the Vi and Satriani guitars, they're still pretty traditional. But, you know, I find a number of the non-traditional modern guitars to be ugly, you know? And there's a reason people seem to keep falling in love with the Strat Tele and Les Paul, or, you know, guitars that kind of markedly look like those instruments. The Bowden from whatchamacallit, those guitars are really cool. They're very different, and they're nicely different. And so they've done something that I think that is aesthetically pleasing. But for the most part, as you look at the new designs, they just look like something, as opposed to something like, oh, I'm drawn to that. They look like something weird, and I just wish it didn't have to look like a spaceship. That's just me ranting, I guess, and I really hate whining. But that's actually what I'm trying to do, is speak to a feeling here. So that's a feeling. I'm just like, man, I wish there were more new shaped guitars. I'm like, oh, that's so cool. It's supposed to, like, gosh, I would never be seen on stage playing that because that's just ugly. And, you know, it's just like when I do, you know, Melissa and I have a fairly open conversation. If I do something she's not into, she's like, I don't know, Doug, you know, maybe that's, you shouldn't do that. In any case, there was a song right there, Windows, Run With It. Thanks, Rick. You know, that's kind of, there's a song that's in the works called Linger. And it's a funny thing. You know, I want to encourage you getting back to this creative thing. Find creativity any way you can. And again, you know, I think people waste their creative energy in imitation as opposed to discovery. And I say that because it's like, it's this ability to go someplace on the instrument where somebody else hasn't gone, where only you uniquely can go. And I feel so many great guitar players are just kind of chasing something instead of chasing how are they going to challenge themselves to find their voice. And it's very confronting because it's a painful, aggravating, frustrating process. But the rewards of it, once you kind of begin to go, I think it sounds more like me than not. Once you kind of get over that 51% hump, you're kind of like, dang. So this song "Linger," there's a guy named Sam Hunt. He's actually kind of a country artist, but I love his songwriting. He can write lyrics like nobody's business. And the great thing about country music is they're storytellers. So by the time you get to the end of the song, you've been on a journey with somebody for the most part. So and he had this song that I was listening to. I was like, and I just kind of left this feeling that the song kind of lingered. And I was like, I came downstairs and I wrote the bones of Linger. And I really wanted to do an instrumental version of "Amazing Grace" on Swagger, but Melissa was like, "Just don't do it." So I was like, "Fine." So I walked downstairs. Uh, oh, sorry. Something like that. So, it just kind of happened as a reaction. So I want to encourage you in the midst of listening to something that inspires you, go, what is your musical reaction to it? Because both those songs happened instantaneously. My going like, well, fine, what would I do? And it takes a minute to kind of find whatever it is that you would do. But if you don't go and try it, you don't go and try it. And eventually it kind of gets a little bit easier to pluck those ideas down because, again, kind of Aaron said it, somehow it's the ability, there's an emotion. And if you can kind of tap into that. And all it is taking something that I felt in the moment and going, well, what does that look like in chords? I don't know. you know, and I think all of us know how to feel our emotions. We're creatives, right? So it's just kind of going, I don't know, let me find the feel of a happy sounding, pensive, little bluesy, pensive. That's a little mysterious, right? That's it's what Joe and Steve love about the Lydian mode, because and again, it's kind of using the modes the way they were intended to be used. Each one kind of has its own little emotion to it, right? And so it's just like, hey, that little tiny bit of Lydian there over the flat too, over the what was the tonics, like, you know, and that is where, you know, kind of knowing your music theory a little bit certainly is a help, but it's a matter of, you know, kind of being conscious of what we're cooking with. Chris, I didn't answer your question about the Solo Dallas thing. I am in the process of putting together what is an ever increasingly growing rig, and I'm going to have a pedal board. What I'm trying to decide is whether the pedal board is going to be down here or back there. Because there's some switching involved, and choosing whether I'm going to actually give myself the freedom of being able to reach down and twist a knob if I want to, or go back and pull a rack drawer out and have the knob back there. I'm inclined to put it back there, and use the Fractal FM3. I've heard there may be an FM6 on its way to me. But regardless, you know, the fractal universe is, and the other thing I'm trying to decide is kind of where all the switching, and, you know, a part of what I want to do is have both for sharing stuff for people that are fellow fractal users about strategies about getting it to front of house. So right now what you're hearing, for better, worse, or in between, is the 2 amps, one of which is the Mesa Boogie California Tweed, and the other one I can't talk about. Super excited about. But the pair of them, and this is again the creative process. I was lying in bed and I was like, I'm going to pair the California Tweed with that other amp and they're going to sound great together. And it's just the same reason when I started working on Linger, I was like, ooh, I'm going to reach for Greenie. I just kind of like, it's just one of those things you just kind of go, once you kind of develop a familiarity with your gear, it's just an instinct. It's kind of like if you've got, you know, I'm not great with tools and stuff around the house. It's not my strength. But it's like having 3 Phillips heads and just knowing which one to go to instinctively. You're like, I'm going for that one, right? It's that same thing. It's the right tool for the job. So, you know, interesting thing, with stereo you lose a lot of definition and clarity. I'm actually going to grossly disagree with you, but not necessarily for the reasons that you necessarily are saying that. For me, what it enables me to do is, I'm going to hard pan these 2 little amplifiers here. And so now what I've done, double tune this thing, but what I've done is I put these bad boys back in the center there. And then I pan them back out to the edges there. To me, that's added a huge amount. And again, I'm not being disagreeable. First of all, my guess is you have a very specific stereo thing that you have in mind that you mean, that I would probably be inclined to agree with you. The way that I use stereo is done for some very specific purposes. And first of all, much of the time, I do not like to stick 2 amps together. Not always, but run them in mono. But every so often I surprise myself and kind of go, doesn't sound bad either. But I like to be able to get the, and this won't sound, wow. Oh, sorry, hang on. So here's the thing. Having a pair of amplifiers enables me to do a couple of things that are really, really important to my universe. I find that at the point that I've got just 1 amp to work with, although I love working with these different things, I find that, and please don't be embarrassed. I hopefully that what didn't come across rude. That was you can disagree with me, and I'm cool with that. I'm down with that. Because my opinion is just an opinion. So let me be really clear about my heart, where I'm coming from. For me, one of the things is once I have 1 amp and I'm all in on that horse, I'm kind of like, that's it. Now, ironically, my main rig is all about 1 amp. It is the Mark 7. That is kind of like I'm all in, and a lot of what you'll hear center channel, even if the delays are left and right, is going to be the 1 amp. So I will run my delays in stereo, but my main amp is running in mono. So there's a lot to be agreed with you. So please, I'm not being that douchebag. What I'm saying is that the stereo thing enables me specifically to create those outer lanes. And the neat thing about it is traditionally I'll layer 2 versions of those 2 amps and pan them, and I'll flip them. So that is to say, if you've got one on the left and the other on the right, for the double track, then I'll flip them such that the same amp is not on the same side, because then it gets really top heavy, and then it really does sound like poo poo. And if I'm sitting there with a pair of double tracked double amp guitars, I'm going, what's not working? I'm like, oh right, I got to flip the pan on those. So that is a double tracking with 2 amps, ending up with 4 amps. The second set, you need to flip the pan generally on them, or put them somewhere closer in on the stereo spectrum. But usually I don't like to put the same amp on the same side most of the time, because the thing that I like about what makes them different starts making it sound one side top heavy, one side sound bottom heavy. That is my take. So the thing is that in terms of the definition and the clarity, what I find in this particular is I'm going to pan these guys back to the center here real quick. And again, why I wanted to disagree with that is because what it's actually enabled me to do is that, well, hang on, let's see if I can do this. Let's hear this amp here. That amp is just a little woofier, fuzzier, woollier. This one, gotta turn up, much less so. So there were parts I wanted the woolliness. And there are times that I didn't. And then being able to fine tune the 2 of them and find the... Sorry, that got a little loud. Hang on. Let me back the brighter one off. Let me back the woollier one off. Let me bring the woollier one back in. Let me boost the woolly one just a little up. And add a little bit of the secret sauce. Less woolly. So the ability to be able to fine tune it like that for me is just like that. So in my mind, that enables me to kind of have more control. The challenge is that most of the time for my main lead and melody tracks, I'm using one amp specifically for that sound. But when I have the opportunity to run into, it's more for the rhythms, but not always. And gosh, is it when I find where I want to use it the way I want to use it, I find that it's a huge help. And I find that I'm not as boxed in as I am with just using one of the setups. But in any case, I apologize if I seemed disagreeable. Disagreeing is a healthy part of human conversation, but let me because this is a slightly public forum, please do not feel like I was calling you out. That was not my intention. Being disagreeable is different than disagreeing, hopefully. All right. So Ernie Ball guitars. The funny thing is I have the John Petrucci 7-string, one of the models that I can never remember the name. That Through a Boogie for a 7-string sound is just absolutely obscenely great. And for that particular sound, when I'm, in the past when I've been doing more demo for hire work, that guitar, perfect. Just great guitars. Great guitars. There you have it. Tony Ferris, I don't know what you're talking about, Dire Straits there, but there's a track that, called Planet of New Orleans, and, kind of marks all. And I remember when Dire Straits, first came out, watching him play with his fingers, I was like, why would you do that? Which is hilarious. Now I spend so much time playing with my fingers. I'm kind of like, well, why wouldn't I? Or why didn't I? It was so funny. But that song, for those of you that haven't heard Planet of New Orleans, just go listen to it. It's just great. Just magic. Such a great vibe. So again, Rick, your comment about mixing up Stevie Ray and Swamp with some Metallica. So this is one of the things that that coming back and hitting these songs for both albums kind of allowed me to go. I ended up with a few more lanes for the next albums. Because, in theory, you're always kind of going, well, okay, this is what I'm doing now. Unlike making new instrumental, where I totally boxed myself in a genre that died. Then you build your own coffin and crawl in it, along with your career. Smart. Not. Instead, the idea was like, okay, well, what are some of the options? So, the swampy thing. By the way, if you're wanting to get swampy, a creative tip, drop D. Such a great vibe. I flippin' love that. All right. Melly Girl. Hello from Brad. Okay. Great to see you. Tony, what's going on? Like that John Petrucci Ernie Ball guitar. Yeah, those are great guitars, Rez. Absolutely. Gary Whitesides, what's going on, my dear friend? Great to see you. Hello, 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 hello. Less Rain is officially cool. Now cool. Holy cow. Oh, Gain. Right. No, Less Gain. Yeah. One of the interesting things about the kind of that interview with Justin Crew about Kirk was, the interesting thing is Kirk was the one kind of opting for less gain, and the producer was like, no, more gain. So it's kind of an interesting thing about kind of that whole gain story. Bobby Valdez. That's a really interesting thing. That came through in about 2-point font. Do you hear a tone difference wrapping the strings over as opposed to the strings through? So the idea is there are folks that will wrap the strings and the way they'll use a stop bar tailpiece as opposed to through, they'll wrap them around. I've never tried it the other way. How's that for an answer? I'm sure it sounds different. I'm also always aware, to a certain extent, I trust strings, and I play Dunlop strings, and it's a funny thing. Strings are such an integral part of what I do that, I just love the, that's a giant bend. And although this guitar, and I talked a little bit about this last time, is that I stretch strings differently for how I'm going to use it live versus in the studio. When I go to use it live, I make sure the strings are about as stretched out as they're going to be. So when I do a bend like that, which is basically 2.5 steps, that's a lot of bend going on there. That when I come back down, the guitar's still going to be in tune. It was just a little tiny bit flat, but that's again because that high E string is stretched for studio playing, where I want to leave a little bit more. Ironically, live you don't want the strings moving around at all, and in the studio, ideally, you don't want to move them around at all either. But you also know that you want to keep maybe a little tiny bit more life in the string. That when you're stretching it out a lot, because the worst thing that can happen. I know my guitars and my strings pretty well. I know that if I stretch my strings really well, I'm not going to break them live. I'll be able to get through 2 sets, live sets that is. And the Baked Potato was 2 90-minute sets, and I played a lot in those 90-minute sets, and I was fine. And then the guitar kind of broke the equivalent of a set later at home playing on whatever. But if I'm at home working in the studio, the last thing I want when I'm in the middle of a song is to break a string, because it's just like everything starts to change, and whatever track or pair of tracks that I'm working on are now going to sound different when I swap the strings on. That's one of the reasons what's great about the Floyd is I have extra string up at the headstock and I let it out and I reclamp it at the bridge. It's one of the great things about those. So the tone isn't different. It's a huge difference. So I haven't tried the different over the top yet. And there's enough Gibsons here that I should probably try it just for pisses and giggles. That's what I started to say. I'm always a little careful. There's a certain amount, I think, that the string kind of traveling through the channel in the traditional way it was intended to run. That is to say, in this particular guitar, the string, just the ball end fits in there and it comes through. I'm inclined to just kind of know that in some ways the string was designed to run like that, as opposed to kind of do the wrap around the top thing. I don't necessarily know if that doesn't end up tensioning the twisty spots of the string and cause the strings maybe to become a little bit less reliable. That would be my concern. I need to ask Gary Brower about that because he will have great feedback, but that's still great. Different guitars. Have I tried the Strandberg? So I was mentioning that a minute ago. I was talking about the Bowden. Their guitars are great, and I love that their guitar necks are not symmetrical. Who would have thunk it? This is, again, what I'm talking about. Is their guitars, they're modern looking without it looking like something that you just be embarrassed to take out on stage. Or I would be embarrassed to take out on stage. How's that? Chris Alexander, you're a funny guy. So, the comment about capos is funny. Hey Lamar, what's going on? We're new buddies here. Hello, nice to meet you, man. So the great thing about this Justin Crew video is I saw some new folks show up, and as I recall, Lamar was new to the mix. So, Welcome to Saturday, dude. Hey. Okay, so Chris, your comment was about capos. So the interesting thing is that my comment slightly snarky from time to time, and I generally don't believe in being snarky because usually it ends up being dismissive of something that's really important to somebody else. But every so often, and I have to explain a little bit of the why and wow and the why and how of kind of my comments about capoing and whatnot. Capos have a tremendous value. I remember seeing Neil Schon with Bad English. And because of John Waite's voice, to get kind of some classic open position chords, Neil was capoing. Sounded great. And he was doing it for a very musical reason. I've spent a lot of time hanging out in the praise and worship world where a lot of the guitar players, they just they learn music simply by learning to capo and never necessarily challenge themselves to learn chord voicings other than open position chords that will enable them to develop other sounds. Now, for the genre, a lot of that genre is about capo-centric music. But for myself, I always wanted to go do I really want to be limited to the same chord voicings over and over, as opposed to kind of having all the rest of the neck here to work with and move around with. Now, to answer your question, there was some double tracking that I did on one of oh, dropped. I can't do it. Sorry, destroying my own little piece. See if I can play that coherently. That's from a song called Falling. That little bit where you're across the string doing that habit with the pinky is just flipping hard. But it's one of my favorite little pieces of music that I've ever written, and that song has a bunch of acoustic guitars on it. And I borrowed one from my buddy Glenn that I've still got on loan, and Gibson sent me a loaner J45. So it's a J35 and a J45, which, by the way, apparently the reason they were J35 and J45 is they were $35 and $45 when they were new. I was thinking about this morning. Where does the name SG come from? Skinny Gibson? I don't know. I was thinking about this. So in any case, J45 and J35, now you know. In any case, those two guitars, one was much brighter and one was bassier. And so I don't think I actually ended up doing it for that song, but I worked with something else. Maybe I did do that, where one of the things I capoed for the bassier guitar and used the open position for the brighter guitar and played, different open position chords capoed, but using obviously different voicing so the keys would match. And it was using a capo in a way that I was specifically trying to elicit a more balanced sound between the two guitars, but not totally balanced, in that the brighter guitar I was using it uncapoed, playing whatever the heck I was playing, and then the other one I was playing up the neck, and it was the bassier guitar, but because I was playing further up the neck, it would get a little bit brighter, not quite as boomy as you get down at the bottom of the neck, and it worked really well. So that may be on there. I'll have to go back and revisit that track. It's been a minute. Awesome, Pharrell, going on, man. There we go. Thanks, Rick. The emotion thing, what a storybook of feeling. Thank you for that. Much appreciated. Is it Pharrell or Farrell? I think it's Pharrell, right? Welcome to the team. Hello, hello, hello. Awesome. Congrats. Great hanging with you, always. All right, is the boogie running into load or aux or whatever, or being my great question? So Right now, what I've got is the boogies on the one side and the other amp that I can't talk about. So on the, and they're both running into 2 notes cab amps. One is the cab amp plus, and the other is a cab amp that has been updated with the cab amp plus firmware. And so basically, the boogie is actually running into. They did a series of officially authorized and recorded Dyne IRs that Mesa Boogie did for that amp. So that is the California Tweed. So there is a California Tweed Dyne IR in the 2 notes cab amp plus. So that's exactly the sound of that amplifier. So it makes it getting in the box much, much, much easier. So to answer the other part of your question, which is a great question, and I have this piece of gear, I can't wait till it gets here. Holy cow. So I have you can kind of see the top of it back there, a very large isolation box. And so both of these amps, the mystery amp over there and this amp, instead of running at 8 ohms, are currently running at 4 ohms because I've got a Boogie half-back cabinet back there. And by the way, I have a guitar lesson that I'm going to need to jet out of here in just a second to go teach. So, oh, John Mello, thank you for that, my man. So I just need to make sure that at starting time, I'm ready to be where I need to be. Okay. So the Cab M Plus enables you to basically run out of the speaker output of the amplifier, and then capture all of that is basically kind of, if you will, a DI of everything coming out of the amplifier. Then in turn, continue that on out to an actual speaker cabinet. So you're keeping an actual speaker load. So in that isolation booth back there, I have a Mesa Boogie half-back cabinet, which is basically, that right there is a 212 version of that. And so the top is open back and the bottom is closed back. The bottom of the 212 version is basically a Thiel cabinet on the bottom, which is one of my favorite cabinets ever. It basically sounds and feels like a 412 with the footprint of a 112, which if you're ever, in a place where you don't have a lot of space, or, you've got a small car or something, they're phenomenal cabinets, especially if you can kind of get them elevated a little bit. They really sound like, unlike most 112 cabinets, they sound like 412s. So I've got, and those, like most of the Boogie, so that's a 212, that's a mono cabinet, but the one that's back there is a 412, and they're stereo, like most of the Boogies. So these other Boogie cabs back here are stereo cabinets. So the rig that I'm going to build this week, kind of finishing up the question that I left half answered with Chris Alexander, my apologies, is I'm going to be putting together some larger rig that I'm still trying to figure all of this stuff out. But to blend those two answers together, one of the things is Fractal has these, there's 2 Notes has the Dyne IRs, and Fractal now has the Dynacabs, I think is what they're calling their new cabinets. And both of them, have the ability to move the microphone around and really control a lot of the nuances that within kind of an individual IR that you would want to be able to do. It's a very important thing to be able to do, so you can kind of, just like you would in the real world, move the microphone around, as opposed to just go for a preset microphone location. It enables you to set it the way you would want to set it. Generally speaking, if this is a speaker and this is the edge of the dust cap, the sweet spot for me is right on the edge of the dust cap, an inch or so away from the cabinet or from the grill cloth. So the point being is that particular cabinet back there is an 8 ohm cabinet that when you run it in stereo is a 4 ohm cabinet. So I'm running these 2 amps at 4 ohms. I notice this more so with the smaller amps, at least to my ear or my opinion, is I actually think that the smaller amps in particular sound better, at least these ones do at 8 ohms. But I'm taking basically a tap off of both of those using the Cab M Pluses, or the Cab M that's been updated, Cab M Plus, and then running that into Pro Tools using the line in. So I'm not using a reactive load, I'm using actual speakers and cabinets to do that. The piece of gear that I'm waiting for is Mojo Tone makes a 212 ISO cab that also has little kind of little mounts for microphones, but it basically is 2 12-inch speakers, and they're sending them, they've got a 50-watt speaker that's their kind of Fender-like speaker that they're sending for me to check out. And those are going to be two 12s, but you can put a top over the top of it, And that's what I'm going to be using for a bunch of the stuff that I'm working on when I want to have an actual 8 ohm load on my speakers, but don't want the sound in the room. So if I were to put those on standby, you'd still hear a little bit of the rumble from that cabinet that's in the back. But one of the things that for me is a big deal is not using a reactive load when I don't have to. That said, the Mark 7 comes with the cab clone IR built into it. And unlike the the JP2C, this version of cab clone that's in there, you have the ability for each of the 3 channels to load one of the 8 presets that come in cab clone IR. And the thing that I love about cab clone IR is they have a great version of these tall recto cabinets that were mic'd up and quote unquote shot by a guy that did a bunch of work with Third Eye Blind, and those IRs sound great. So that is probably how I'm going to be using the Boogie as I start recording with that. That is to say, the Mark V. But the rig I'm going to be putting together is going to be using initially 2 tall recto cabinets, running the middle 2, and I talked about this last week. If you could see these as kind of, each of the 4 sets in vertical pairs of speakers, the middle 2 are going to be the dry Mark 7 signal, and the outside of the one are going to be the stereo signal coming from the Axe effects. That is to say, the wet signal. So to answer your implicit question, I'm coming out of the Mark 7. I'm running out into the Mesa Boogie. Sorry, I'm running out into the Axe FX3. That's where I'm getting my stereo separation. Running that out into the Seymour Duncan Power Stage 700 power amp. That's going into the 2 outside set of speakers. I haven't put this together, but I know it's going to be unreal. And those will be completely wet. That'll be completely dry. And one of the important things about that is that I'm not putting any effects in the loop, at least initially, of the Mesa Boogie. And I find that I prefer the sound of effects after the amplifier. That is to say, take the slave output, or what I was doing before was I was using a cab clone IR on the JP2C because I was not a big fan, honestly, of the sound of the IR using the cab clone IR that's built in there. And since then, they've made some changes on that. That is to say, when they did the Mark 7, they instead of just giving you again the choice of just one IR, you now have a multiple range of different IRs that are the ones that came from cab clone IR, and you can load your own. So with the JP2C, I was using my cab clone IR again on the one that's the IR of the tall recto cabinet. Just ridiculous sound, and I think it's the blend of the 57s and the 121s. Just an obscenely great sound, just perfect. And then in turn, that was going to the Axe FX3, and that's where I was getting my stereo separation. I should say Axe FX3, then going out into Power Stage 700 and running that into the 2 cabinets. So I'll be using that for the 2 outside lanes for the effects, but the 2 inside lanes of the 2 cabinets in the center will be using the, and again, what I just said about kind of using the 4 ohm output on the smaller amps. I don't think on the Mark 7 I'm gonna really notice that big a difference, simply because it's such a high-powered, high-gain amplifier. I don't think it's going to matter as much using the 8 ohm outputs when I'm using one cabinet versus using the 2 4 ohm cabinets, 2 4 ohm outputs when I'm using the 2 lanes, if you will, of the two different cabinets. Didn't explain that very well, but that is to say, Mark 7, 2 middle lanes of the cabinets, 412s. The power amp picking up the sound of the just affected signal coming from the Axe FX3, just running pure wet effect is going to be on the outside too. And that's going to be how that's going to be running. All right. So that is probably going to be blended with some effects, including potentially the Solo Dallas stuff. I am absolutely loving this pedal. I started using this. This is the Eddie Boost Drive. and that's from my buddy Eddie Haddad and the great people over at Messiah Guitars. That is my favorite drive pedal these days. And when I was doing that trio of shows in the South, I flew my Mark V 25 with me and the aforementioned Cab Clone IR and my power amp, and that's what I was using for those shows through a loaned Mesa Boogie 412 recto cabinet. And that's where I really started playing with stereo through one of those cabinets, because initially I was a little hesitant. I'm like, am I going to hear the separation? I was so impressed. I'm like, oh, I can do a wet dry wet rig using 2 cabinets, and I won't have a problem with that at all. And Eric Johnson, and I mentioned this I think last week, has been doing the pair of using inside a cabinet and running stereo signal inside them for decades, and certainly hasn't hurt his tone at all. Okay, excellent. Satch, BKB, thanks, man. All right, Lamar, hopefully that answers your question. I have a bunch of mics, and I'm going to be shooting my own IRs, but that has not happened yet. Oh, awesome. I love that. Wow, stereo sounds awesome in my headphones. This is the thing, is it leaves room for vocal at the center. And whether it's instrumental, and this is where the stereo thing in particular becomes really important. And my analogy of everybody driving in the FIP and fast lane, including the people that maybe shouldn't be over there, it gets crowded really quickly. So the ability to create depth and body and add more guitars, but get them out of the center channel really allows you to go, oh man. And so it's one of my favorite things to do. I love the way 2 different amps work together. And again, when I heard Justin talking about the Metallica sound is the pairing of 2 different amplifiers, I'm like, when we think of great rhythm guitar, Metallica is one of the first bands that comes to mind. Satch, BKB. I use stereo also in records live, but it's different when you need to be very focused with the band. So, and this is the thing is like, yes, it's easy to go from like, there's a difference between focused and just too much, right? And it's really one of those things that I'm also being conscious of, because my instinct is like when I start using 2 amplifiers and then I start double tracking the performances. So I end up with 4 tracks. So it gets messy really quickly. And the challenge is, if one of your tracks is a little floppy, it's that you're completely correct, is that it does lose focus. So I can use it to create focus, but I probably should have started by saying, if you're not careful, you lose focus. And where this becomes a problem is when you have your 4 sets, that is a rhythm guitar 1, 2 amps, rhythm guitar 2, 2 amps. Then your melody or solo guitar using the same 2 amps, that's where it starts to get dicey, because you start to end up with some masking where you're hearing enough of the same frequencies too much that it starts to get cloudy. So you're absolutely correct in that regard. And so yes, yes, and yes. Thank you for hearing my earlier comment about hopefully not being disagreeable while still being able to, in some cases, disagree. But yes, the stereo thing, once you start using enough stereo pairs, it can get in your way, and you're absolutely correct. And now sounding like some AC/DC crunch, some Lonely Hearts, a combo possibly. That's hilarious. Right. Also, Melissa reminded me to remind everybody, next Saturday and Sunday, although I don't normally do a live show on Sunday, I'm going to be down checking out Crossroads Guitar Festival. And again, in possible contrast to everything I've said about finding your own sound, here's what I would encourage each of you to do, is kind of go, well, okay, as I'm looking for inspiration on something I can do and hopefully find my own way of doing it, I don't want to close the window on ideas that I can kind of grab that are floating by. And the great thing about going to this Crossroads Festival, I don't want to go there as a spectator. I'm going as a riff grabber. I want to watch the brothers Landreth. I want to see what about their slide playing I want to bring into my slide playing, because this guy right here is almost undoubtedly wrong window. Not quite as swampy a representation of what I want it to be, but it's going to be. But some sort of kind of slidey melody that just because I want it to be as greasy and as nasty and as filthy, you know. So I'm hoping I'm going to watch somebody pull out a slide and go, oh, okay. And I'm, you know, so the idea of opening the door and the window to inspiration where somebody makes you react. And for me, if I could offer one piece of advice, you know, again, I think there's a certain amount. There's an amp back there. Can you see it? Can you see it? Can I tell if I can see it? Hang on. There we go. No. Okay, just to the side of that amplifier there. What are you? You're a Fender Bandmaster Reverb. That amp has the vibe of Stevie Ray in it like nobody's business. And when I got that amp, I was given permission to temporarily have it camp out in the bedroom. And it's just, it was basically me. I spent some time with the Strat, but I also spent a bunch of time playing through a Flying V through it just because I wanted to see kind of what my vibe into that thing would sound like. But it was very, 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 very living in Stevie Ray land. So, you know, in slight contrast to what I said before about, you know, hanging your hat in somebody else's front hall, hanging your hat there with the intention that you know you're not going to live there, I think is a very healthy thing to do. So you can kind of go, oh, you know, I want to understand what it's like to the best of my ability to kind of live through that lens and then bring that back into Doug land. So when I hang my hat in my front hall, if I want to pull that out, but in an homage sense versus an imitation sense, then I can do that. So that amplifier was a very important gateway amplifier for me to be able to do that. It just sounds like the Stevie Ray vibe. But at the same time, what it enabled me to do is have just a little bit of the Stevie Ray thing that I can pull in, especially, you know, right? I mean, that's you know, just like you can kind of go, okay, but it's not a Strat through a Fender amplifier, right? So you're kind of going, okay, it's going, hey, dude, you know, you changed my life. Thank you for that. We're tipping the hat, but it's also, it's kind of going, hey, you know, but I didn't have to pull out a Strat and a Fender amplifier and go all the way down the rabbit trail to do that. And you know, so I've really kind of, I've wanted to have a little bit of the Stevie Ray thing come through because he's somebody that's touched my life so much. I saw him immediately after he left the David Bowie gig. I saw him at a little tiny club in San Francisco called The Stone, and I was literally, there's the stage, and there was my chest, and there was Stevie Ray, and I was like, met him after the show. He was gorgeous. It was amazing. Changed my life. And, you know, so, but the idea is, you know, kind of the essence of what I'm hoping that you can leave with is that, what's your reaction? How's it going to make your music react as opposed to just imitate it? And I think this is where we've gotten into a place where I'm going to find the best way of saying it, where societally, we've kind of given ourselves permission to just kind of live in the kind of like, well, I just want to live in the imitation realm as opposed to like, well, what happened to like going, okay, well, we can spend some time imitating, you know. And there was a period of time in 1982 where I learned that solo because I really, really wanted to. I wanted to know everything about how Neil was doing what he was doing because that just like it moved me at such a deep level. I'm like, I just love this guy's playing, just love everything about it, and I still do. He's one of my biggest influences, and you'll hear Neil's playing all over what I do. But I also don't want it to be like, oh, there he's going doing the Neil thing. But at the same time, the imprint and my reaction to that versus the imitation thereof, I think there's nuance to that. And I think we've gotten to a place societally where we kind of go, oh, it's okay to just live in imitation land versus imprint and reaction land. So I want to encourage you to kind of go, if you listen to your influences, how can you take the imprint and the inspiration from what they're doing and bring it into your world as opposed to the other thing? And I'm not saying that, maybe you're not, but I'm saying if you are, think about it. Okay. Everyone needs a break. This boogie is a bad boy. Awesome. Oh, that's funny. Rick, thank you so much, Rick. Really appreciate it. That's going to be like, that's almost legible. Love the show and all the time you put into it for all of us to enjoy. With great pleasure. This, it's a funny thing. I don't have, I don't have a group of dudes. There's the guitar group that gets together on Fridays, but quite often I'm a little busy and I just can't kind of make it out for that. So it's kind of seems like it's either really pathetic for me, not you, but I don't look at it that way. This is kind of my social like get together with my bros on Saturday morning. This is a very social thing, so it actually means a lot. If it means more to me than I think I realize, and it means a lot to me, cognitively and consciously to do this, because I have some rather ambitious plans for the next 12 months, and this particular thing is very important because it's a place where I actually am choosing to make myself very present consciously and not do a Patreon, not do something where I could charge people for my time 24/7 and just milk the money machine as best I possibly can. This is more of a core values thing where it's just like actually being present with people and being able to kind of converse with them, I think ultimately creates a better vehicle to actually have the type of relationship I want to have with the people that I'm going to be involved with in whatever this kind of interaction that I have with people is. So it's very important to me. Ben Tom, gorgeous greedy, love you, Melissa and Doug. Sorry I missed most of the show today. Was on the phone with my mom for 2 hours. Great to see you though, and we'll rewatch the parts I missed. Great to see you as well. Say hi to Mom for me when you next talk to her. My mom's gone, and those are valuable moments, my friends, so cherish them. Please. I'm sure you are, obviously. Do I have a title for the new album? So the instrumental album is called Swagger. It just kind of really was. The Doppler Gang, which is the vocal one, is probably going to be called Take Me Back. That's the title of one of the songs, and it's for, Satch, I don't know how old you are, but I'm quite probably a bit older than you. And so we were driving around San Francisco, Melissa and I got this idea for the song. And it was basically back when rock was classic, listen to my old mixtape, before the old crew scattered and went our separate ways. And it's this song that's really kind of nostalgic. Look back again, if looking at blah, 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 all these friends and lovers, so on, some remain, all these places have their meeting, some are gone but still remain. That Beatles song, right? Summer '69. There have been a number of songs that tell that story of kind of looking back and kind of, the past that, that has kind of somehow, you don't know how it happened, but it kind of flew by and it's gone. And it was a song that, is very close to my heart, and it just, take me back. It seems to be such a, because what we're in this is, kind of classic rock vibe, where we're really, really the funny thing is, it's sonically, I should say vibe wise, in contrast to what I said about, taking it, and the next thing, one of my favorite things that Caleb shared with me was the version of Come Together that Gary Clark Jr. did. And I think Gary's going to be at this thing. I hope he is at the Crossroads. But I loved that he didn't just kind of do a remake. He took it someplace new. I was like, love that. And it had all this big production, and it had fuzzy guitar, and it had great vocals. I'm like, it was just so good. So, at the same time, both these albums, the vocal and the instrumental, were designed to be almost as if they were made somewhere between 1978 and 1982, which was the era that I was coming up listening to my favorite Aerosmith records, listening to, and it was a little bit just before then, but, Aerosmith played Cal Jam 2, and they did this version of Draw the Line, and I just remember seeing, and my dad videotaped that for me, and I remember just watching Joe Perry, Steve Tyler, and I was like, oh, I want to do that. I just remember just watching the way that they just kind of played that song and the swagger they had. I was like, oh. And I'm not 20, and the music I write and play does not sound like the music that 20-year-olds write and play, and that's good. Let them have their lane, and I love that. And the new modern instrumental is great, and I love that. And let them have their lane. They do it really well, and they do that music better than I would ever be able to do it. So really, kind of this music is being made if there's a center of the target, not that the center of the target is the only place that it's intended to be placed. And I got to go in a second, but I have a moment more. There we go. The idea is for people who grew up in kind of my era to have a record that can go like, somebody made a record for me that's kind of got made now somehow. It doesn't necessarily make sense. This particular song, Slave to the Grind, is also intended to be, a potentially chart-worthy song. A bunch of these songs were intended to be written such that if there's any charting to be done in whatever charts look like these days, in the blues rock chart, Slave to the Grind is one that, the way we're putting this together, we're doing it with the intention that it's going to be something that's chart-worthy. Because we also want to be relevant in that way. But really, making a record that, the great thing about kind of getting a chance to make these records effectively 3 times, in that, there was the initial demos that's kind of making the record. There was the actual basic tracks. Then there was the kind of the ability then, as I went out with the instrumental stuff, actually creating versions for the band to rehearse, collectively to that. Then we went to play, and then go back and recut all the my guitar stuff. Have a very clear idea of what it is that I want to do, and how I want that to feel when people listen to it, so they can kind of put it on, kind of go, kind of takes me to a very familiar place that is familiar for the good reasons, and kind of like a warm blanket. You ever get a new shirt or a new jacket, and you're kind of like, feels like home. But home is traditionally a place that, we've lived in for a while. Want to have that. Let's see. Yeah, that front mic really has, this front mic really has, when it's up. My mic's off. Thank you, love. That's why I pay her the big bucks. Kidding. Sorry about that. Gosh darn it. Well, it always happens eventually. So Devon. So let me answer your question. Great question about developing unique voice as a writer. That's two part. One is on the instrument. I really feel as an identifiable voice. I've really it's been in the past 2 months that I really kind of went, okay, I think I'm kind of at a place now when I pick up the instrument, I'm far enough along that I just do it instinctively, where I was still searching for something. I remember at the beginning of this process, I was searching, and it was just a matter of banging my head against the wall long enough that I was just going to keep trying. It's a great question. As a writer, and one of the producers said, ultimately it's the songs that people attach themselves to. As a writer, in many ways, a number of the lessons that I learned as a writer happened 35 years ago in a band that I was in called Captain Crunch, where we were writing songs, we were trying to get a deal, but I learned a lot about the art of songwriting in and of itself for writing commercial material. As an instrumental songwriter, I felt, although I've kind of had a sense of my own approach to playing, and I wasn't trying to imitate anybody, I felt I sounded more like my influences than I wanted to, or more importantly, I sounded less like myself in the ways that I wanted to have a unique voice myself. That, over the first record, new instrumental, kind of, the songs are what make it sound, if you will, quote unquote, uniquely me. And the lead playing as a response to the songs doesn't sound as much like my influences as, left to my own devices, I might. On this group of material here, one of my dangers is if I listen to too much Joe Satriani, I start playing very Satriani-like things. He was my teacher for 3.5 years, so I have to be really, really, really careful, or it just comes out like a flower on a vine. It's just I can't help it. So I have to be really, really, really careful about that. So it simply because his influence is so strong. And I remember he came and visited a place I used to live, kind of his musician's house, and he sat down and he kind of went. There was some lick that I used to play when I would sit down, kind of have a first lick to play, and he sat down with my guitar and he played my same lick note for note the way I played it on my guitar, and I didn't even say anything. I was so in shock, and I was just like. I just kind of like, there's that. And so because of that, there's this, a sensibility about his music that is very easy for me to on-ramp if I'm not very conscious about it. So if I start listening to Joe excessively, I just start playing like him, which is not what I can afford to do to get that individual voice going. So, if there's somebody that you like, I listen to them, and the more I listen, the more I sound like them. That would probably be, put yourself on a little temporary starvation diet of that. That said, the flip side of that conversation is going and listening to these guys that I want to emote whatever, ironically about, making records that sound like they came out in 1978 and 81, is a big part of why I'm going to the Crossroads Festival. Is I want to hear everybody, and it is pretty much the everybody. Jared James Nichols isn't going to be there, and I wish he was. I think he would have been a very logical addition to that, and I'm sorry for him. I'm sure he'll be somewhere kind of going, I should have been there, and deservedly so. He's made as much noise in the space as anybody else has in the past year, and he should be there. But it's all the guys that are the guys, and be able to take if you will, put my hand on the pulse of what is happening now in that genre. Is going to be really, really, really great, because I'm getting ready to go in and cut all the solos. I will not have recorded anything that's going to be the solos, the final versions on any of these albums. So having that little bit of input and feedback, I'll probably play much the same stuff that I would, but there'll be some decisions that I'll make that'll be different, or they will be the same, but with that bit of information. But I may play things a little bit differently, having heard the inspiration of the other guys that are out there playing slide, going like, I'm not going to sound like Derek Trucks. That's what I really want to go. And I want to hear Derek Trucks, and I want to hear the things that are not the quintessential, wah, 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 that thing that he does so exceedingly well. At the moment that you hear it, you go, oh, Derek Trucks vibe, just like the Stevie Ray vibe. I want to hear the other stuff that Derek does, kind of going, oh, okay, I can onboard some of that, because the slide is such an important part of it. So to answer that question, it's really been 2 months since I really felt, okay, I'm more there than not. And that happens playing the songs live, because you have to kind of make it happen live. You don't have the luxury of a redo. You drag your behind out onto a stage and you kind of go, here it is. And you kind of begin to find out what the essence of what it is that you're doing is. I hope that answered that coherently. Awesome. Okay, and I'm just reading through. Okay. Oh, solid guitar. Okay, thank you. Standard guitar, solid guitar. Holy cow. On the SG, according to Wikipedia. I love that. Solid guitar. That's great. Hunts, with great pleasure. Thanks for joining us. Thank you. I got a lesson that starts in 1 minute, so I'm scrolling through here quickly. Sean, hello, 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 hello. Rick, thanks again. Jay, hello. And by the way, again, I'm going to be out of town next week. And Adrian, always a pleasure. Love seeing you, my man. Divine, yeah, muted. Thank you. Lost vocals. Do walk by the Parthera. What's going on, Abel? How you doing? Cool. Thank you. All right, Manuel. Hello. I love that. Mike Rand, great to see you. Thank you so much. All right, I got a lesson to teach. Thank you so much. Tom, what's your mom's name? Because I see that you are still here. So let's do this right now. There we go. Tom, I'm not muted. Hey, Tom, what's your mom's name? Jean, thank you very much. Okay. All right. Thanks for that. All right. Love you all. Thank you so much. It's been an interesting week. I take it that's her last name, Harhai. Okay. All right. Much love to all of you. I will be praying for your mom there, Tom. Yeah. Nobody said this last part. Matt, great to see you, my friend. What gets easier with the parents? It's not. But it's, it's part of the process. So, all right. Gosh darn it. Loved you all. Have a great, great week. Actually, 2 weeks. I'll see you in 2 weeks. Hang on. There we go. Make it a great one. Thanks again for sharing.